The 70 weeks of Daniel. This is one of the most interesting passages in the Bible. And these 70 weeks are outlined in Daniel chapter 9 in the last 4 verses, beginning with verse 24 and continuing on. I'm going to read it quickly. It's going to be hard to get through this whole teaching in 10 minutes, but I'm going to read it from the Amplified Version. Daniel chapter 9 verse 24 says, 70 weeks of years, or 490 years, are decreed upon your people and upon your holy city Jerusalem, to finish and put an end to transgression, to seal up and make full the measure of sin, to purge away and make expiation and reconciliation for sin, to bring in everlasting righteousness, permanent moral and spiritual rectitude in every area and relation, to seal up vision and prophecy and the prophet, and to anoint a holy of holies. That verse is the entire scope of this prophecy. Verse 25 reads, Now therefore, and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem until the coming of the Anointed One, a prince, shall be 7 weeks of years, and 62 weeks of years. It shall be built again with city, square, and moat, but in troublous times. That verse outlines 69 weeks of years. Now verse 26, and after the 62 weeks of years, meaning after the 69 weeks of years, because there were 7 before the 62, after the 62 weeks of years shall the Anointed One be cut off. In the Hebrew that's karat, or killed, and shall have nothing and no one belonging to and defending him. Speaking of the Messiah being crucified. And the people of the other prince who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and even to the end there shall be war, and desolations are decreed. Finally, verse 27 says, And he shall enter into a strong and firm covenant with the many for 1 week, 7 years. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and offering to cease for the remaining 3½ years, and upon the wing or pinnacle of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the full determined end is poured out on the desolator. These 4 verses are really something, and to have a good understanding of what's going on with these 4 verses is very beneficial. Once again, now I'm working with my NIV. This is where I keep all of my major notes. Verse 24, Daniel chapter 9. 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city, to finish transgression, etc., etc. Now this obviously hasn't been completed, because we have not put an end to sin and all of that yet. And also, this is speaking for and to Jerusalem and Israel, not to the church. 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city, Jerusalem. Verse 25, it says, From the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Anointed One, the ruler, comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. That's a total of 69 weeks of years. It took 7 years to build the temple, and then from that point forward it was another 62 weeks of years until the first coming. This is a total of 69 weeks of years. That in biblical calendars are 360 days per year. So this brings a total of 173,880 days. Now, this prophecy is so powerful because The decree to rebuild the temple began on March 14th, 445 BC, and we can see that in Nehemiah chapter 2. The first coming was on April 6, 32 AD, Palm Sunday. And you can look at Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. Look at Matthew 21, 5, and Luke 19, 28. If you really want to look at this calculation, how it's all broken down, you can read The Coming Prince by Sir Robert Anderson, an excellent book. But this prophecy was fulfilled to the T. Now, looking at verse 27, it's speaking of what we commonly refer to as the Antichrist, the lawless one, as seen in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Here it says in verse 27, he, the Antichrist, will confirm a covenant. He will confirm is not the best English interpretation. The best would be enforce, or he will strengthen a covenant. This covenant may already be in place, and the Antichrist confirms it, or he strengthens it, or he enforces it for 1/7. That's 7 years. And in the middle of the 7, 3.5 years in, he puts an end to sacrifice and offering. That means that the temple has to be rebuilt. And that's not yet seen, although everything is certainly ready for the temple to be rebuilt. But it has to be rebuilt in order for the Antichrist to end sacrifices and offerings. And on a wing of the temple he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. Verse 27 is outlining the 70th week. If we back up, you look at verse 25, or actually further, 24 is the scope of the whole prophecy. Verse 25 outlines 69 weeks of years. Verse 26 is outlining a gap. We don't know how much time is here. It's after the 69th week, and yet it's before the 70th week. It's we know that the Messiah would be crucified, and the temple and Jerusalem would be laid bare. And then, you can't count the years. The years and the time here isn't outlined. It's just a gap that we see after the 69th week and yet before the 70th. And then finally in verse 27, it outlines the 70th week, which we could look at Revelation chapters 6 through 19. If we take a peek at Luke chapter 19, verse 41, we see Yeshua, Jesus Christ, speaking. And he says, as he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it. And he said, if you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. This is where the partial blindness of the Jews begins. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, look at Romans chapter 11, verse 25. Verse 43, Yeshua continues, the days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you and encircle you and hem you in on every side. They will dash you to the ground, you and the children within your walls. They will not leave one stone on another. Why? Because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you. Now, 38 years after he said that, it all happened. Jerusalem was leveled, the temple was destroyed, and he says they will not leave one stone on another. That is literal because there were fires going on, the temple burned down, and every stone had to be turned over in order for them to recover all the gold that had melted. But he says, because you did not recognize the time of God's coming. Here, Jesus, Yeshua, is holding them accountable for, they should know the prophecy of Daniel. I hope that helps you to understand those last 4 verses of Daniel chapter 9 and the 70 weeks of Daniel and what they entail, what they're all about. I can do more on this, and if you have questions, certainly I invite you to toss them at me, and we can build on this further. God bless.